My name is Tori Thatcher, and for 27 years, I lived as a ghost in my own home. I was the daughter who was too much when I had needs and too little when I had achievements. I was the buffer, the peacekeeper, and, above all, the acceptable sacrifice at the altar of my sister's convenience. I remember exactly where I was standing when the foundation of my life finally crumbled. It was November 21, 2021, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my tiny studio apartment in Boston, the kind of place where the radiator clanks like a ghost and the windows rattle. I was happy. I had a pumpkin candle burning, its scent of cinnamon and cloves filling the room, and I was staring at my half-packed suitcase. I had already bought my plane ticket home to Connecticut. $280, non-refundable. I'd worked 3 weekends of freelance graphic design to afford it. I was looking forward to the smell of my mother's stuffing and the sound of my father's laugh, even if I knew I'd spend most of the weekend listening to my sister, Victoria, talk about herself. Then, my phone rang. Mom flashed on the screen. I smiled, thinking she was calling to ask me to pick up extra cranberries. Hey, Mom. I was just about to. Tori, she interrupted. Her voice was flat. Cold. It was the tone she used for a verdict, not a greeting. I need to tell you something. Listen, I've been thinking, and don't come home this year. I actually laughed. I thought it was a bit. A weird, poorly timed joke. What? Mom, my flight is in 72 hours. I've already packed. Victoria doesn't want drama, she said, as if that explained everything. She's pregnant again, and she's very sensitive right now. She doesn't need the stress of you being there. The air left my lungs as if I'd been punched. Drama? Mom, I haven't even talked to Victoria in 3 months. What drama could I possibly cause by sitting at a dinner table? Exactly, my mother snapped. And let's keep it that way. You know how you get, Tori. You're so sensitive, you always make everything about you, and frankly, your sister just needs her family around her right now without having to walk on eggshells. Her family? I whispered. My voice felt like it was coming from a mile away. I am her family. I am your daughter. Don't be dramatic, Tori, she said, the irony lost on her. It's just one Thanksgiving. Get a refund on your ticket. We'll see you at Christmas, maybe. If things have calmed down. The line went dead. I stood in the center of my apartment, surrounded by the scent of pumpkin and the sight of my open suitcase, and I realized I had finally been shrunk down to nothing. 27 years of trying to be easy, trying to be the daughter who didn't cause a ripple, and it had all led to this. I was being excluded from a family holiday not because of something I'd done, but because my very existence was considered a stressor to the sister who had spent her life making me invisible. I called my father. Surely, he would see the insanity. He was the moderate one, the one who always told me to ignore your mother when she gets like this. Dad? Did Mom tell you? A long, agonizing pause followed. I could hear the muffled sound of a football game on the TV in the background. She mentioned it, kiddo. And you're okay with this? You're okay with me spending Thanksgiving alone because Victoria decided she doesn't want me there? You know how your mother is, Tori, he said, his voice weary. She's just trying to keep the peace. Victoria is in a delicate state, and we just want a quiet holiday. It's not personal. Not personal. I felt a sob rise in my throat, hot and jagged. How is being told I'm not welcome at my own parents' house not personal, Dad? Do you want me there? Silence. 5 seconds. 10. I could almost see him sitting in his worn leather recliner, looking at the ceiling, wishing I would just stop talking so he could go back to the game. I think it's better if you listen to your mother this year, he finally said. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my non-refundable ticket. The memories started to flood back. A highlight reel of all the times I'd been the acceptable sacrifice. My 16th birthday, cancelled because Victoria had a breakup. My college graduation, where they arrived 2 hours late because Victoria had a minor prenatal scare that turned out to be gas. Every time, I was told the same thing: don't be sensitive. Your sister needs us more. Why do you have to make everything about you? I realized then that there was no amount of small I could become that would ever be small enough for them. If I disappeared entirely, they would probably complain about the paperwork. I looked at my pumpkin candle. It was still burning. I realized I had two choices. I could spend the next 4 days crying in this apartment, proving them right that I was a dramatic mess. Or, I could take the $280 I'd lost and spend it on the best damn meal Boston had to offer. I wasn't going to be a ghost anymore. If they wanted a quiet Thanksgiving, I'd give them exactly what they asked for. I'd give them a silence that lasted a lifetime. Thanksgiving morning in Boston was gray, bitter, and smelled of wood smoke. I woke up to the sound of my neighbors overhead, the muffled thuds of children running, the clatter of extra chairs. It was the warmth of a life I was no longer permitted to access. For 3 hours, my phone sat on the counter. No text from my mother. No, thinking of you, from my father. At noon, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. There it was. A photo posted by Victoria. The whole family was gathered around the oak table in Connecticut. Mom was beaming, Dad had a glass of wine, Victoria was front and center, hand over her baby bump. The caption: so grateful for my world. These are the people who matter most. #family first, #blessed. I zoomed in. I counted the place settings. 5 adults, 1 toddler. 5 chairs. There wasn't even an empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't just excluded me for peace, they had curated a reality where I didn't exist. I was a glitch that had been successfully deleted. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a sharp spark of defiance. I put on my favorite emerald green sweater, the one my mother called too bold, and walked to Harborview Grill. It was a white tablecloth institution that felt like a hug from a different era. The hostess looked at me with a pained expression. Just one, dear. Just one, I said. I'm treating myself. She led me to a mercy seat, a tiny table squeezed next to a massive family that had pushed 3 tables together. I sat there, pretending to be fascinated by the menu, listening to the family next to me. They were loud. They were messy. At the head sat a silver-haired woman named Eleanor. She looked like the sun. Everyone was orbiting her warmth. My turkey arrived, but I couldn't taste it. All I could feel was the weight of the 3 empty chairs at my table. I tried to be invisible. I stared out the window, trying to convince myself I was strong. I wasn't. A single tear escaped and landed in my mashed potatoes. Don't be dramatic, Tori, my mother's voice hissed in my head. Stop making a scene. Honey? A hand touched my shoulder. It was the silver-haired woman. She smelled like lavender and expensive soap. I'm fine, I lied. Just, the onions. Eleanor pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down. She didn't ask. She just claimed the space. I've been a family lawyer for 30 years, Tori. I know the difference between onions and heartbreak. Why are you sitting here alone? I told her. The 7 words, don't come home. Victoria doesn't want drama. Eleanor's eyes turned to velvet-covered steel. Drama, she whispered. That's the word they use when they want to punish you for having a pulse. The people who accuse you of causing drama are almost always the ones creating the chaos. They just need a place to dump the trash so their own house looks clean. She held out her hand. Come on. We have an empty chair. It's been waiting for you all day. I looked at her hand. Then I thought of the 5 chairs in the photo 3 states away. I took Eleanor's hand. I walked 3 feet to the next table, and I sat down. I didn't know it yet, but I hadn't just moved tables. I had moved families. The Morrisons didn't just invite me to their table, they inhaled me into their lives. That first Thanksgiving dinner lasted 4 hours. I learned that Richard, Eleanor's husband, was a retired principal who turned every situation into a teachable moment. I learned their son Daniel was a neurosurgeon, and Marcus was an architect with eyes that saw right through my "I'm fine" armor. They didn't treat me like a charity case. They treated me like a long-lost cousin. So, Tori, Richard said, leaning back with a glass of port. Eleanor tells me you're a survivor of the Great Thanksgiving Exclusion of 2021. I flushed. It sounds so silly. Like a child crying over a seat at the table. It's not silly, Marcus said, his voice quiet. It's a breach of contract. A family is a contract of mutual care. If they break it, you don't owe them the service. Eleanor nodded. In my years in family law, I saw it 1,000 times. There is always one child designated as the scapegoat. Their job is to hold all the family's flaws so everyone else can feel perfect. If you're the scapegoat, Tori, it means you're the only one in that house with enough integrity to feel the pain they're trying to ignore. That night, Eleanor pressed a card into my hand. Sunday dinners. Every week at 6. No drama, just too much pasta and a loud dog named Barnaby. If you don't show up, I'm sending Marcus to find you. I went home, but for the first time, my apartment didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a staging ground. I didn't go the first week. Or the second. I was a Thatcher, I was used to being the trouble. I was waiting for them to realize I was too much. But Eleanor called every Wednesday. Tori? Richard is trying a souffle and we need witnesses in case the kitchen explodes. See you at 6. By the 3rd month, I was a regular. I became the person who helped the grandkids with homework. I became the girl Marcus took to the movies, just because. My biological family, meanwhile, was a radio silence that bordered on the surreal. No Christmas card. No Happy New Year. It was as if by following their orders once, by not coming home, I had triggered a permanent deletion. I spent Christmas with the Morrisons. I opened a gift from Richard, a high-end tablet for my design work, and I had to leave the room because I couldn't stop crying. Tori? What's wrong? Marcus found me in the kitchen. He noticed, I sobbed. He noticed my old laptop was lagging. My own father couldn't tell you my eye color, but Richard noticed my processor speed. Marcus pulled me into a hug. He didn't tell me I was being sensitive. That's what a father does, Tori. He pays attention. You're not used to being seen. It takes time to get used to the light. A year passed. Then 2. I stopped checking Victoria's Instagram. I stopped being a Thatcher in everything but name. I was a thriving designer, a woman who knew how to make a perfect pie crust, and a person deeply in love with an architect. One afternoon in 2023, Eleanor and I were in her garden. Tori, she said. The law recognizes what the heart already knows. It allows for adult adoption. It changes the birth certificate. It formally severs the old ties and creates new ones recognized by the state. I looked at her, my heart hammering. Why are you telling me this? She smiled. Because Richard and I have 3 sons. And we've always wanted a daughter. We've considered you ours since that first turkey dinner. But we'd like to make it official. If you're ready to start being a Morrison. I looked at the house where the lights were always on for me. I've been a Morrison for a long time, I whispered. I'd like my paperwork to match my heart. I didn't know then that this legal shift would be the very thing that brought the Thatcher family's world crashing down. I was just happy to have a name that didn't feel like a bruise. Adult adoption is a strange, beautiful process. It feels like a quiet revolution. In the eyes of the Commonwealth, I was no longer the daughter of Robert and Linda Thatcher. I was the daughter of Richard and Eleanor Morrison. When the judge signed the final decree, I stared at the gold seal and felt a physical weight lift, the weight of 27 years of failed expectations. I was Tori Morrison. I didn't tell the Thatchers. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. In their minds, I was still the dramatic daughter, in a Boston studio, stewing in bitterness. They had no idea I lived in a brownstone with Marcus. They had no idea I was a lead art director. They had no idea I was loved. The silence broke in the summer of 2024. Marcus and I were on a dock in the Berkshires, watching the sunset. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Tori, 5 years ago, my mom found you at a table for one. I've spent every day since making sure you never feel alone again. Will you marry me? Yes, I whispered. 1,000 times, yes. We posted one photo on Facebook, our hands joined, the ring glinting. The caption, choosing each other every day. Engaged. My phone didn't just ring. It exploded. Within an hour, a text came from a number I hadn't seen in years. Victoria. Tori? Is this real? You're engaged to a Morrison. As in the architecture firm? Why didn't you tell us? Mom is hysterical. She thinks it's a slap in the face that she found out on social media. Call her immediately. I felt a flicker of the old anxiety, the urge to apologize. Then, I remembered the 5 chairs in the Instagram photo. I didn't call. I blocked her. 2 days later, my mother called from a different number. I made the mistake of answering. Victoria Thatcher. What on earth is wrong with you? She shrieked. We are your family. Everyone is asking about the wedding, and we don't know a thing. I haven't been a Victoria Thatcher for 2 years, Linda, I said, my voice calm. Don't be dramatic. I know you're upset about that one Thanksgiving. It wasn't one Thanksgiving, I interrupted. It was 27 years of being a footnote. And I'm not upset. I'm just moved on. I'm Tori Morrison now. Legally. Richard and Eleanor adopted me 2 years ago. The silence on the other end was absolute. Adopted, she finally whispered. The word sounded like filth in her mouth. You had yourself adopted by strangers? At 30? That's insane. A betrayal of everything we gave you. You didn't give me a seat at the table, Linda. You gave me a non-refundable ticket to nowhere. These strangers gave me a home. I expect an invitation, she snapped. Your father and I will be there. We will walk you down the aisle. We won't have the neighbors thinking we've been replaced. You haven't been replaced, Linda, I said. You were never there to begin with. The wedding is private. Goodbye. I hung up. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clean. But I knew my mother. She wasn't a woman who took no for an answer when her social standing was at stake. She spent a lifetime curating a perfect family, and she wasn't about to let the dramatic daughter ruin the finale. The battle for the wedding was on. But for the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking. The months leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in psychological warfare, conducted entirely from the Thatcher side. Once Linda realized command wasn't working, she switched to martyrdom. I started receiving handwritten, tear-stained notes about how a mother's love is eternal and how I was punishing them for a small misunderstanding. Victoria sent emails through an alias. Dad isn't sleeping, Tori. He's heartbroken. How can you be so cruel? Is this what those Morrisons are teaching you? To hate your own flesh and blood? I sat at my kitchen island with Eleanor, the letters spread out like evidence in a crime scene. They're using the grief tactic, Eleanor said, her eyes narrowed. It's a classic move. They want to make the consequences of their actions feel like your cruelty. It works, I admitted, my hand hovering over a photo of me as a toddler. I feel like a monster. I feel like I'm the one causing the drama. Eleanor turned the photo face down. Tori, look at me. When you were that toddler, they were already deciding you were the backup. They didn't miss your wedding because you're cruel. They missed it because they'd been missing your entire life. She reached into her bag. This is why the adult adoption was so important. It's a legal perimeter. Inside the folder were the no-contact notices for the wedding venue. I've spoken to the security team in Napa, Eleanor said. They have the Thatcher names and photos. If they show up, they won't make it past the front gate. You are a Morrison now, Tori. And Morrisons protect their own. For 27 years, my biological parents used the law of the family to keep me in line. Now, I was using the actual law of the land to keep them out. But the constant barrage was taking a toll. I was losing sleep. I felt like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. Marcus found me one night, staring at the guest list. Tori. Stop. He took the pen from my hand. You're trying to figure out how to make everyone happy so they won't be mad at you. I just don't want a scene, Marcus. I don't want the Thatchers to ruin everything. They only ruin things if you give them a role in the play, he said. Stop casting them as the villains. Cast them as people who aren't invited. They're just background noise. We have a family. Every single person on this list wants to be here. I leaned against his shoulder. Why is it so hard to believe I'm wanted? Because you were trained by experts to believe you weren't. But the training is over, Tori. Class is dismissed. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I'd blocked the emails. I'd shredded the letters. I was building a castle, and I was pulling up the drawbridge. But as I looked at the final program, with Richard and Eleanor Morrison listed as parents of the bride, I knew the drawbridge wouldn't be enough. Linda Thatcher didn't believe in boundaries. She believed in appearances. She was going to show up to the event of the season, whether she was invited or not. I just didn't know she'd bring a surprise witness. The Tuesday before the wedding, the bomb finally dropped. I was at my kitchen table, finishing a brand identity project, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, expecting wedding favors. Instead, I found my mother. Linda Thatcher stood on my doorstep like a specter. She looked exactly as she had in the Instagram photo, immaculate hair, a crisp linen suit, and an expression of practiced disappointment. Tori, she said. Not a greeting. A summons. She pushed past me into the apartment. She didn't look at the art or the sun-drenched windows. She went straight to the bookshelf and picked up a photo of me and the Morrisons at Christmas. So this is her, she said, tracing Eleanor's face. The woman who bought my daughter with a turkey dinner and a few Sunday pastas. She didn't buy me, Linda. She found me. Don't you dare talk to me like that. We gave you everything. She slammed the photo back down. And you repay us by having yourself adopted like a rescue dog? Do you have any idea how much shame you brought to this family? The only shame in this family, Linda, is that I had to go to a restaurant alone on Thanksgiving to feel like a human being. It was one holiday, Victoria. And we apologized. You didn't apologize. You told me to stop being dramatic. And you didn't call for 3 years. I was in a car accident in 2022. I spent 2 nights in the hospital. Do you know who stayed in the chair next to my bed? Eleanor. Do you know who paid the deductible? Richard. Where were you? Linda wavered. A flicker of guilt crossed her face before she smothered it with rage. How were we supposed to know if you didn't call? You had my number. You just didn't want the drama of a daughter who might actually need something. I walked to the door and held it open. Looking at her now, she just looked small. She looked like a woman terrified the neighbors would find out she wasn't perfect. I want an invitation, she said, her voice dropping into a desperate edge. Your father and I are staying in Napa. We've already bought our clothes. If you turn us away at the gate, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of a Morrison you've become. You already know I have a restraining order for the venue, Linda. If you show up, you'll be arrested. Is that the appearance you want for the neighbors? You wouldn't. You wouldn't arrest your own mother. Try me, I said. I've spent 5 years learning what a real mother looks like. And she doesn't use blackmail to get a seat at a wedding. She stared at me, the martyr mask finally cracking. She looked for the ghost daughter, who would cave and beg for forgiveness. She couldn't find her. She turned and walked out. We'll be there, Victoria. Blood is blood. You can't change that with a judge's signature. I locked the door and breathed. 10 minutes later, Eleanor called. Tori? Is everything okay? She was here, Eleanor. She tried to use the old script. But I've forgotten the lines. Good, Eleanor said. Choice is steel, Tori. And we're choosing you. I looked at the photo of my chosen family. Choice is steel. The Thatchers were coming. But they were bringing a knife to a tank fight. The wedding day was a masterpiece of golden light and rolling hills. Napa Valley in June is a place where it feels impossible for anything to be broken. I stood in the bridal suite, the scent of white roses heavy in the air. My dress made me feel like I finally inhabited my own skin. Eleanor was behind me, adjusting my veil. You look like a miracle, Tori, she whispered. I feel like one, I said. Thank you. For the dinner, for the room, for the name. You earned the name, sweetheart. We just held the pen. Through the window, I saw the guests arriving, 100 people. Then, I saw the gray SUV pull up to the main gate. My father's car. I watched the security guard, Silas, step up to the window. I saw my mother's head leaning out, presumably screaming about her rights. Silas didn't move. He pointed to the "No Trespassing" sign and the court order on his clipboard. The standoff lasted 5 minutes. Then, the SUV turned around, but it didn't drive away. It pulled onto the shoulder of the road, just outside the property line. My parents weren't leaving. They were going to sit there, 100 yards away, like a dark cloud on the horizon. They're at the gate, I told Eleanor. I know, she said. Do you want me to have the police move them? No, I said, a fierce clarity taking hold. Let them stay. Let them watch. Let them see exactly what they discarded. I walked down the aisle to the sound of a string quartet. Marcus was waiting, his eyes bright with tears. Richard was on my arm, his step steady. When we reached the front, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" "Her family," Richard said. "We do." The real reckoning came at the reception. The stone barn was glowing with 1,000 fairy lights. We sat at the head table, the Morrisons and me. The MC stood up, tapping a glass. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special introduction to make. I looked at the back of the room. The large barn doors were open to the evening air. And standing just outside the threshold, on the public path, were 2 figures. My mother and father. They were standing in the shadows, watching the warmth of the barn like people looking through the window of a house they'd been evicted from. Please join me in welcoming, the MC announced, his voice booming, the parents of the bride, Richard and Eleanor Morrison. The room erupted. 100 people stood up, cheering, whistling. Richard and Eleanor stood, beaming, waving to the crowd. It was a standing ovation for the people who had stepped up when the world went dark. I watched my mother's face as the words, "parents of the bride," hit her. I saw her stagger back, her hand going to her mouth. She had expected to be the grieved mother. Instead, she was seeing a room full of people who didn't even know her name. To them, the Thatchers didn't exist. They weren't villains, they were just strangers. My father stood behind her, his head bowed. He looked like a man who had finally realized that the peace he'd kept was a graveyard. I stood up and took the microphone. Thank you, I said, my voice carrying into the night. 5 years ago, I sat at a table for one. I thought if you weren't good enough for your family, you were just alone. I was wrong. Family is a choice. It's the people who see you when you're invisible. It's the people who make room when the doors are slammed shut. I looked toward the open doors. To the Morrisons, thank you for choosing me. And to anyone else watching, thank you for the lesson. I finally know what I'm worth. The Thatchers turned and walked away into the dark. They weren't dramatic anymore. They were just gone. The morning after the wedding, the world felt quieter. Marcus and I were on the patio of our honeymoon suite, the Napa mist clinging to the vines. My phone was face down. I knew it was filled with messages from Victoria and the Thatcher echo chamber. I didn't check them. Instead, I reached for a thick, ivory envelope forwarded from our apartment. Inside was a letter from Victoria. Mom is in the hospital, Tori. Her blood pressure spiked after the wedding. She's devastated. I hope you're happy. You replaced us in front of 100 people. But remember, one day, you'll have a child, and you'll realize that blood is the only thing that lasts. You'll regret this. I looked at the loopy, perfect handwriting I'd spent my childhood trying to emulate. What is it? Marcus asked, leaning over my shoulder. The final script, I said. The one where I'm the villain and blood is the only truth. I walked to the edge of the patio. Victoria is wrong. Blood isn't the only thing that lasts. Choice is. Choice is what built the Morrisons. Choice is what built us. I tore the letter into small pieces and let the wind take them over the vines. A year later, I was the one in the hospital, the labor and delivery ward. Marcus was holding my hand. Richard and Eleanor were in the waiting room, having been there for 12 hours without a single complaint. When the nurse placed my daughter in my arms, a tiny miracle with Marcus's eyes, I felt a love so fierce it made my breath hitch. What should we call her? Marcus whispered. Emily, I said. Emily Grace Morrison. I looked at my daughter and made her the same promise Eleanor had made me on that snowy night in Boston. I will never tell you not to come home. I will never tell you you're too much. I will never ask you to be small so someone else can be big. You will always have a seat at my table. Not because you're my blood, but because I choose you. Every single day. The Thatchers are a distant memory now. I heard through the grapevine that my mother is still talking about the great betrayal. They live in a world of ghosts and appearances. But I live in a world of Sunday dinners and messy kitchen floors, a family that is legal in the eyes of the law and undeniable in the eyes of the heart. My name is Tori Morrison. I am a wife, a mother, and a daughter of choice. And for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. That's my story. If you're sitting at a table for one this year, look up. Someone might be about to ask you for your name. And when they do, tell them the truth. Tell them you're ready to choose yourself. I'll see you in the next Family File.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe Family Files for more.